Greetings! This is I, Tantus Narrator Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor, here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome, one and all. We're diving into Halflings today. Why, yes, once again I am visiting the majestic and mighty world of Golarion, the main world setting of the Pathfinder role-playing game systems, and today we're continuing our series that I've been doing here on the channel, channels, I should say, really, of speaking about different species, different ancestries, and their history set up, what versions of them exist on the Golarion world. And today, as I said, is Halflings. Now, Halflings are an interesting one, and we're going to talk about them today, but my comment to begin with here is there is not a lot on Halflings. As much as Halflings are an intricate part of the Golarion world, they unfortunately find themselves overshadowed both metaphorically and oftentimes physically by the other humanoids of the areas. And this shows by their knowledge of their history, a lot of their cultures and stuff, which we will talk about, which I would find it very interesting if we could get some deeper books on the Halflings that exist. Most of the places, there is a book to shout out, though. It's 32 pages, though. Other than going through things like the campaign settings, Interseed World Guide, stuff, a lot of other books that have it. There is a Halflings of Golarion book, which we will mention here, and I will show off in a second here. Let's switch me over as I discuss it. This book here does provide some information, the Halflings of Golarion, but unfortunately, as books go, not a lot. It's, again, 32 pages, which isn't a lot. Granted, books like Elves of Golarion and stuff that I talked about didn't provide, was also a similar number of pages, but it's one of those things that the Halflings of Golarion don't dive as in-depth as perhaps I would like for information here. So, just a thing. Anyway, why don't we get started on diving deep into Halflings and talk about them a little bit more. So I would recommend, if you do want to deep dive on your own, check out the Halflings of Golarion book. But, you know, it is a good source, at very least, of the books to check out. Anyhow, let's just talk about Halflings in general. So, Halflings are still a, by size, small species, small race, small ancestry. And they do tend to keep out of the spotlight when it comes to a lot of settlements. They do find themselves in a lot of human settlements in particular. Humans and Halflings have lived together for long periods of times. But as much as they have this interconnectivity, the Halflings have found their place in Golarion, and one that is relatively important for themselves. So they are of shorter sizes, probably one of the shortest, the smallest of all the civilized races in Golarion. About 3 feet tall, look very human in proportion, but with rounder heads, slightly more childlike proportions than a human. So they aren't just a small human. The coloration is as variable as the places that they call home. Skin tones can be from a rich almond color to pale nut brown. Many have brown hair, though there's a fair large portion that are fair basically, some of them will have more like kind of blondes and ambers and stuff like there. Comparable to the human ethnicity Ulfin when it comes to hair colors and a lot too. But brown is the traditional, most of the colors. Their eyes tend to be fair, with green and blue being the most common colors. They often do have eye colorations that are indeed very similar to many other humanoid species in the Golarion regions. And similar to how humans have adapted the various regions that they're in, the Halflings of Golarion have found them that they have eye colorations and appearances that do typically kind of mimic a little bit of the humans of the regions that they live in. They have very durable feet and soles that are very tough. As such, they rarely wear shoes, though some wear kind of type of spats. They have a fine growth of soft, warm hair on the top of their feet that keep them warm, and they have very slightly pointed ears. Their sexual dimorphism between male and females is very similar to that of humans, males being slightly larger and heavier, but unlike with many of the larger races, the difference seems a lot less obvious for the smaller folks. It is slightly larger, heavier. Males do grow some facial hairs, oftentimes being things like sideburns are the major times, and they do tend to be a good 2 to 3 inches taller. Females are a little slimmer, shorter, basically very close to like what a human woman would have, except half the size. But they again have both of them pleasant round faces, big cheery smiles are noticeable. Their small size, though, has been known to get very adventurous or guileful halflings into tight spots. But they do have cunning and an uncanny luck to get them out of a lot of tough situations. Granted that they tend to get themselves into. Similarly, a lot of the clothing they wear, the dresses that they wear, what they put on themselves, matches that of their human neighbors. This can even be shown in some of the areas where halflings are treated much worse, such as a place like Cheliax, where halflings tend to be, unfortunately, slaves. But Cheliax also then tend to dress them in very, basically, ways that show off almost their symbols of status and stuff. So they dress them in cheaper fabrics, though, that are ostentatious and kind of show off their wealth of their master, almost. Which is just an unfortunate thing there. We'll talk more about that side of things for halflings in a little bit here, but that is again, an unfortunate part of a portion of the halfling population. So, anyway. Let's talk about halflings' personality a little bit. Because as much as we can talk about how they appear physically, we should talk a little bit about the way they are in general. How a lot of halflings act. So, your average halfling could be considered very easygoing, an excitable person. Welcome back. And can be kind of a little bit frantic if aroused, you know. They are oftentimes perceived as physically weaker because the fact they are seen because they are smaller. But they also, a lot of halflings understand that they're going to be underestimated by folks larger than them, regardless of how strong they are or not. The stature and their position makes them oftentimes just underestimated. Now, connected to this, of course, is the concept of luck for halflings. It's a thing that they actually have. If we break it down on a scale of halfling stats, which is, something we do have to mention here, they have an ability called halfling luck. You can't get beyond that when we talk about them at all. It's a thing. And it's one of those things that halflings themselves are known for keeping an eye out for good opportunities to improve their lots in life. They're always looking for that. Again, the idea of danger seeking is something that a lot of other species look at halflings and say that that is something that happens with them. But halflings oftentimes take risks when they understand the risk versus reward. It's not that they aren't stupid, they aren't foolhardy. It's that they're very good at judging risk versus reward and deciding whether or not this risk is worth it. I'm making a good decision. And they do have a sense of spotting danger and being aware of it, being smaller and in a situation where more things are a threat to them. That makes it, combine these things two together, they have this almost preternatural luck because of it, that they spot the danger, they read the danger, and they understand when you should or should not take the risk, when the risk is worth whatever reward is coming in. And yes, they can sometimes fail, but this ability to judge the risk makes it that, they oftentimes pay off more. So it does give them a reputation for being very lucky. And it is a result of, some cunning, skill, superior reflexes, and this ability to read the situation very good that really breaks down to what their luck is, rather than something that's more supernatural. And, it earns them this reputation. But, that's to said, there is something a little more unusual. There are those halflings that actually seem to be magnets of bad luck instead. As much as the ability for halflings to be honestly lucky isn't really something, supernatural, we do find unlucky halflings, which is a very unusual thing, known as jinxes, that are generally avoided by a lot of folks. And it's not really a curse. It's a kind of thing that most halflings think of these individuals actually being blessed by Desna. They're encouraged to study magic. And these jinxes basically are thought to be able to turn their luck around and inflict it as bad luck on others. They think of it as, the jinxes themselves think of it as evening the odds, but it's sort of like they being a magnet for bad luck means, rather than I am having bad luck myself, is I'm causing bad luck for everyone else around me. So, halflings do have a natural wanderlust, and this opportunistic nature, because of looking for opportunities, means that a lot of them do end up as adventurers, travelers, people that go out of their way. Basically player characters, and a lot of NPCs too. Their kind of vivacious attitudes, their natural talents, and superstition, of course, that traveling with a halfling is good luck, mean that plenty of people will be willing to have a halfling join them on their adventures or travels. They do make great clerics and rogues, but many of them also find themselves in the positions of monks and rangers. Not to say there can't be other classes, but those are the ones that a lot of them do tend to favor. So, let's kind of talk a little bit about, honestly, history of halflings. Because this is an interesting one to talk about. Halfling history is one that is very close to human history. There is no legend of an ancient homeland of halflings. And a lot of halfling history is intrinsically linked to human history and human cultures around it. They grew up alongside the cultures of Avastian. And Avastian seems to be where they originated from. A lot of nations and regions that have had success there, halflings have been connected to it. So, evidence of direct halfling-only history is kind of overshadowed by the human societies they're connected to. Ancient Osirian has the first ancient references to halflings that exists, and though elves have noted that they were around before Earthfall. But they're not talked about from that period of time. And it's unfortunate that the domination and enslavement of halflings, which is something that has happened a lot, dates back to things like Ancient Osirian. It's recorded in those time periods then. Granted, there's also evidence of, and we'll talk about them because they were in Thassalon, one of the ancient empires pre-Earthfall, but Thassalon basically, everybody was kind of subservient to whoever was in charge. So, I mean, were they better off than their Osirian cousins? I mean, everybody was under the Thessalonian government and under their iron fist, unless you were part of that government. They were very oppressive. So, the thing is, and that's the thing is, halflings links with a lot of these empires that have existed tends to be very dark. And a lot of places don't have records. Yes, they're mentioned Osirian, but even like the old Tal'Darim Empire doesn't really have records of halflings. And, you know, nowadays is probably the best time for halflings, as, yes, there are still places in the world like Cheliax where the enslavement of halflings is a pretty major part of their entire thing still, but a lot of halflings are out in the world. And even in Cheliax, when it comes to those that are looked upon for their servitude, halflings are at least treated a little bit better than some of the other slaves in Cheliax. Unfortunately for anything in that system, but it's not a great system otherwise. So halfling labor isn't a major thing. It can be, but a lot of times it's serviles for major households and stuff like that. Halflings did join with a lot of the revolts that happened out of Cheliax, and that is one of the reasons that there are a lot more free nowadays, too. So halflings are all over the place, but it's just an unfortunate part that their history is oppression. And where they come from, a mystery. And granted, not all. There are plenty of regions in the world that halflings have always had a freedom, but a lot of major empires and nations have oppressed them. It's just an unfortunate part of halflings' history that their optimism, their nature, basically has allowed them, and their opportunism has allowed them to survive a lot of that, in a way, and come to where they are now. So yeah. But anyway. That's halflings. Let's talk a little bit about halfling society here. Because as much as halflings are intrinsically linked to the various cultures that they are in, and a lot of times it seems as though they directly blend the human cultures and cultures that they're part of, halflings themselves do have a little bit of cultural identity on their own. Again, this makes sure that halfling settlements, no matter where they are never alike. They have the cultural influence of whatever nation or area that they're in, followed by a little bit of that generalistic halfling way of doing things. And again, that malleability has been part of their lack of recorded history. They are adaptable to wherever they go, and their bond with humanity, for better or worse, has meant that that's why their history is with them too. And it's very much same the cultural. So it's an inseparable part of the entire thing. So, birth as shown here, is an important part of halfling community. It's very well celebrated. New baby is potential, and it could be seen as a great hero, an artisan, a chef, an even great parent themselves. So children being born in a halfling community is something that is very well celebrated. And because, again, they've faced a lot of hardships, pregnancies and new births are always seen as something very important to their community. Again, a lot of other species will see kind of like early celebrations as a jinx on the child's building, and, because things like the mother or the infant could die. But, halflings see it again as they've faced hardship. We celebrate the hardships that could come, regardless of whether, the child is born or not. The fact that they are facing the hardship of trying to come into this world is an important one. Unfortunately, places where halflings are still enslaved, like Cheliax, Isgar, Nidal, mortality rate for infants is very high. But other places of the world, they're better. Andorra and Varese, quality of life for halflings is a lot better. Halfling children are more likely to survive, and, their mothers are in better positions. So, a halfling attains basically maturity in society and physically combined at about 2 decades, about 20 years old. Once they're 20, the community celebrates this occasion that you are no longer a child, you're no longer under your parents, you are an adult. And the parents and community elders basically agree at a coming-of-age task, oftentimes influenced by dreams and omens. They're basically usually mundane, combination accomplished over a couple of tries. Acquiring a particular weapon, preparing a fancy meal, swimming the breadth of a lake, things like that. In oppressed communities, they still try to celebrate these, but it's more difficult. Once the young halfling succeeds in their task, the family hosts a celebration, food, drink, music, dance. Basically, the parent, but sometimes teacher, mentor, or elder presents a special token to the young adult now of their achievement that they have succeeded in achieving adulthood. It's a symbolic item representing basically that they have done their best. A halfling that becomes a wizard will oftentimes use this token as their bonded object, enchanting it. There are times that a halfling can fail in their coming-of-age task, though. If they've failed it 5 times, they kind of consider that halfling as a jinx. The task is suspended for a year, which then they look for further signs that the halfling is a jinx and urge them into arcane training, as it is seen that jinxes should not practice arcane. Again. Halfling marriages in the more modern versions of Golarion have 2 parts. A ritual followed by celebration. Very similar to what we in modern humanity do. Halfling priest then performs the wedding ceremony. If one is not immediately available, an elder could do a temporary one until an appropriate priest could be used to affirm the union. So basically, they still will have their situation, it's just then they will have a smaller thing where a priest will do it later on after elder officiates it. They usually have an Erastial priest, but it could be an appropriate priest to whatever community they're in. It's usually, the ceremony itself is usually very private. The couple, the priest, and a couple of close friends. Making the exact date and time of this ceremony to the public is very unlucky. And friends and families know it's coming, they won't know it's until it's over. So the actual ceremony itself is incredibly private, incredibly small. Again, if you don't get the priest, you get the elder to do it, and then the priest will come in later. After which, there will be a celebration. And this dates back to a lot of this way of doing things, to connections to things like old imperial chelics and stuff, and the laws that were under them and oppressing halflings at the time built this kind of version of the marriage where they actually have the, ceremony in secret. Because then they can't be oppressed by the Chelaxian stuff, and the way they did that. Anyway, there was no celebrations to honor the wedding, but as halflings have found themselves more free, after the ceremony, still kind of in secret, it's a celebration. Basically, the wedding's done. We're going to celebrate now that we're together, prosperity to the couple and things like that. Halflings, in a similar way, feel the loss of kin to death. When things finally, they refer to it as the end, dying as the great journey. They believe wondrous places and experience await them after death. Most are confident that Pharasma will judge them worthy after death. They believe that Pharasma will judge them worthy after death, and they'll be able to pass through the boneyard to the infinite new worlds ahead of them. Their funerals are simple, solemn, made just to be and involve burial. And after the burial, friends and family will retire to the home to remember the departed and comfort each other. And alcohol is a big part of that entire thing. So, yep. Another note, though, to say is, in more stable communities, a lot of times younger halflings will set out once they've come of age to travel and figure out what they want to do. Some of those that go off on that wanderlust continue it, but there are many that will kind of travel around at their wits, kind of learning what they can, and then want to come home and, settle down. The halfling speaks Haldane, but they also speak Halfling. Now, Halfling is an interesting language because it's believed to be a coded version of Haldane and Varisian that came about during, of course, Imperial Cheliax. And it spread then across the Vastian and Grund. There's many regional dialects of Halfling that it can be difficult for foreign Halflings in in complex areas to kind of talk with each other because of the various dialects within it. It does use the same grammatical structure as Aslanti, an ancient language. No, scholars can't really understand why this is the case, but it does suggest that halflings were present with the ancient Aslant Empire alongside humans, of course, which, with their knowledge of Thassalon, which we'll talk about, they probably oftentimes were. So, similar religious worship, well, it oftentimes matches for halflings to the human gods in whatever homeland they are. But those that emphasize things like community, beauty, honor, freedom are more focused upon. Abadar, Caden, Kalian, Desna, Erastil, Iomade, Sarenrae, Shaelin are all very popular deities for halflings to serve. There is a sizable minority that actually worships an aspect of Norgrimmar, an evil god known as the Grey Master, with a more sinister cult venerating him as the Blackfingers. If a halfling works in a service profession, they oftentimes find themselves as maid, cooks, or innkeepers. They don't mind these positions because it puts them in a position to observe the world around them. Again, it's important to keep an eye out for opportunities, and if you're in a position where you can keep an eye out for opportunities, you're a lot better off. Knowledge is very important, and, they don't have a very good defensible position. Putting yourself in a position where you can gain a lot of knowledge, great. Halflings have, of course, been exploited for labor, whether slavery or not, and it's unfortunate that in amongst slave species that are enslaved in Golarion, and especially in Cheliax and the Inner Sea region, they're one of the more common ones. Again, Cheliax just does not treat them well, unfortunately. Now, let's talk about the different groups of, some of the different groups of halflings in Golarion. So, the Inner Sea region is where halflings are most commonly found. Andorra, Cheliax, Galt, Isgar, Mothun, Nidal, Taldor, Varisia. But because they've traveled, they are found a lot across the globe. Even the other continent of Arcadia, they are found there. And they're one of the more populous races in Arcadia. If you wish to see more on Arcadia, go back into my Golarion World video, which I would recommend if you want to learn a little bit about there. But yes, there is a large group of halflings in Arcadia. So, the Jerichs are a society of mountaineering halflings who live in the Barrier Wall Mountains bordering the Mwangi Expanse. They're rugged, known for their they're as bill bands, forming builders groups known as them. The Barrier Wall being the most extensive mountain range in northern Grunt. In Cheliax, of course, it's a notorious place when it comes to halfling kind. As everywhere in the world, even places where halflings tend to be, unfortunately, seen as servants or slaves, they're treated probably the worst in Cheliax. A derogatory term known as slips is used by them, and Cheliax citizens just have contempt for them. The Myronese of Eorborea, a northern region, a much colder region, part of the Casmaroon continent, are another group. They've settled in these colder climates. They suffered from the choking plague centuries ago and have scattered a little bit more to the edges of Avastian from this region because of that. In Isgar, halflings are unfortunately treated very similar to Cheliax, and also has a pretty high population of halflings in the region. A lot actually were bought slave-wise by the Church of Asmodeus to work in the many orphanages that sprung up as a result of the Goblinoid War a decade ago. In the Mwangi Expanse, we have, as shown here, one of the Songo, a reclusive dark-skinned halflings who live in the Verdian's Laughing Jungle. There are tribes of demon-worshipping cannibal halflings said to inhabit the Kaval lands of the Mwangi Expanse too, but again, that's a rumor more than anything, and they might be or they might not be. But the Songo themselves, not involved in that. In Varisia, there's a small population of Othaban halflings. Here's where Othaban are very important because they hail from ancient Thassalon. When Zin Adarsti was revived and returned to the modern world, they were transported basically across time. So, yeah, Thessalonian halflings exist in Varisia. And then the Verduin Forest has the Ulam halflings, who have a love of intricate craft and works, and have inhabited the Verduin Forest for centuries. The Verduin Forest, of course, being between Andor, Taldor, and Gult. And because of their connection to the Fae, tends to help protect and keep them safe. But that, of course, is the Halflings of Golarion, who unfortunately have suffered a lot. As I said, there is a decent chunk of information, but it's the unfortunate thing that a lot of our information that we know about halflings is directly connected to where they're from. And there are more nations and places in the world that you will find halflings, and certainly, as I said, the Halflings of Golarion book dives a little deeper into some of these. But they're a people who match with humanity. Where this connection came from, who knows? Again, they don't keep their history. They don't have that history. They don't seem to care about that history. It doesn't matter to them. So collectively, their history just is human history in Golarion. And there have been places they've been treated well, and unfortunately, plenty of places they have not. But modern-day Golarion has found themselves carving out a much better niche in many places in the world. The ancient days and exploits, are they over? No. But there's plenty of places where it's better. And because of that, I mean, the strength halflings have is impressive. As they've always had. The strength to overcome hardships, to see opportunities, to face a lot of issues and problems. And halflings just survive and find ways to thrive and do their best. So, they're a race to be honestly, species to honestly be respected. An ancestry that proves themselves strong against problems that may have broken any other ancestry out there. And honestly, you think it would have driven them away from humans, but it hasn't. And that's another impressive thing. They still connect with humans, even when they're no longer oppressed and find themselves fairly equal members of a society. It's alongside humans. They're a great opportunity for them, for better or for worse. But maybe just a little luck will keep them going. So, but that's it for halflings for today. I hope you came to respect them a little bit more, because honestly, I think their strength is a respectable thing. The power to overcome what has been faced upon them. If you've enjoyed this, check out my other stuff. I have done other deep dives into the ancestries of Golarion, the Golarion people. And definitely check those out. Remember, I live stream this on Twitch Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Tuesdays and Thursdays, early afternoon. Saturdays, late morning. So check it out live if you want to join me, as various folks do, occasionally chatting. And of course, you can always check this out on YouTube. If you're watching it there, hey, thank you for joining. Maybe check me out live on Twitch. Following on Twitch is great. Subscribing, liking, ringing the bell, leaving a comment is great. If you played a halfling character, let me know, especially one in the Golarion world. Let me know what kind of character it is and what kind of adventure it was, because certainly there could be some interesting stories for that, and how much you dived into this halfling lore of Golarion. I'm curious, because it's one of those things that it's interesting to see how much people do or do not dive into it. Anyway, until the next time, though, I'm going to say to all of you out there, farewell.